So this time it's a forgotten test video for a Let's Play of Ratchet and Clank Full Frontal Assault, and the reason I couldn't do this one is twofold. Firstly, when I tried to edit the footage, it was subject to some really nasty frame rate issues, but secondly, there just wasn't enough commentary. And I had already made both a small analysis of the game and a long play, so I felt this was pushing it anyway. I was pretty happy with my commentary for the test video, but, you know, there's no point if I can't keep it up. So just enjoy what there is here, and again, be very aware of the terrible frame rate issues. They don't fix themselves until about 17 minutes in.
Captain's log. Stardate, let's call it Wednesday. Released from public service, former President Quark decided to retake the mantle of righteousness, to serve as the people's perennial protector, to defend the galaxy with the vigor of a true hero. And the galaxy? Well, the galaxy has never been so boring.
This is just sad. He lost the election like 3 months ago. Don't you think it's time for an intervention?
I believe Captain Quark is having a difficult time adjusting to life in the private sector.
Computer, find me something to shoot!
Sorry, dude, we got nada on the radar. Have an awesome day, though.
Pardon me, Captain. It appears there are rogue cleaner bots in the docking bay. Would you like to...
This is one of only 2 video games where you actually get to play as Captain Quark, not counting the mini-games in Up Your Arsenal, so of course we're going to be playing as Captain Quark the whole time. We have standard melee attacks and we can throw a weak projectile.
Hey, Captain, we're receiving an encrypted transmission. Please report to the bridge pronto.
Good evening, Captain. Are you ready for the longest day of your pathetic life?
A shadowy supervillain. This is perfect! What do you think he wants? Money? No! Power! No! Money and power! Oh, who cares what he wants? We finally get to shoot something!
Trying to execute. So we can just ship the detective back this way for death. Oh, for crying out loud! As I was saying, I have deactivated 3 planetary defense centers in this sector, plunging each location into total chaos. Oh, splendid! Grandarian marauders have already begun attacking. I wonder who could have called them.
Was it me?
It was me, you dolt! Only you and your team are permitted to each location. If I even smell a single Polaris defense trooper, I will deactivate every station in the galaxy.
Who are you?
Someone who doesn't like Captain Quark very much. Someone he failed.
You know what this calls for?
Don't say it.
I'll tell you what this calls for.
He's gonna say it.
The Q-Force!
He said it.
Hail!
Q-Force base identified. Your Q-Force base is powered by these generators. If they are destroyed, Q-Force will lose control of the planet.
Yeah. They destroyed our generator. Come! It must be avenged! Fist, meet face.
Pyro turrets required to defend generators.
Welcome to the gameplay of Full Frontal Assault, and I'm sure you'll notice right away why it got such a mixed reception. It is, at least in part, a tower defense game, though that doesn't mean the traditional Ratchet & Clank elements are gone, either. We don't have quite enough money to buy a pyro turret, which means we need to explore to find some bolts, which we're going to be doing a lot in this game. The tutorial here specifically instructs us to put our first turret next to the generator. And defending our generators is important, but normally you defend them by not letting anything get near them. As such, most of our bolts are going to be spent on defenses for the outside of the base.
Weapon pods have been deployed.
We have a lot of weapons at our disposal in this game, much like the other Ratchet & Clank titles, but in this one we have to explore to find them throughout each level. After a level ends, we lose all of our weapons and we have to explore again to find new ones, which are always hidden in different locations.
The combustor is now available.
The combustor is pretty much the most basic weapon you can get. It fires rapidly, but it's not terribly powerful, and it stuns enemies at least slightly with repeated strikes. There are a lot of ammo crates and nanotech boxes lying around. Each ammo crate refills at least one of your weapons to full ammo. These generators are often surrounding enemy bases and not our own base. They're just here right now as a tutorial. That lane beyond the force field we just broke is, well, a lane. It's what the enemies have to go through to get to our base in the first place.
Battlefield keynotes. Activate all keynotes to unlock the Planetary Defense Center. Reactivate Planetary Defense Center to drive back Brungarian marauders. Enemy dropship now on approach.
As the help desk lady said, if we follow power cables we eventually get to key nodes, which is how we complete objectives that finish the stage. All of the enemies that specifically target our base will come in through dropship, and the help desk will warn us whenever there's a dropship approaching.
Incoming enemies detected.
The invasion detector shows which lane an enemy is coming from and what type of enemy it is. These enemies are pretty weak. Normally if we had any turrets they would be able to deal with them, but since we only have one turret we're going to go take care of them ourselves. You always have your hover boots on by default because as this is partially a tower defense game, it's very important to be able to get from place to place quickly. You can destroy most weak enemies with your fists just fine, but you don't get to level up your weapons that way. You get experience for your weapons by shooting them at enemies, and if you actually kill an enemy with a weapon, you get much more experience for that than if you just shot at them. Each weapon has 5 levels as of a patch, but I think in the original game they only had 3 each. If we perform these weapon collection minigames perfectly, we get bolts from the machines as well as our weapon of choice.
The Pyro Blaster is now available. Enemy dropship now on approach.
So you do have to choose which of the weapons available you prefer, as each machine provides a different set of weapons to choose from, and you can only pick one. That being said, I find all of the weapons to be useful. The Pyro Blaster is especially useful for dealing with swarms of smaller and weaker enemies, as you're seeing right here, hopefully. After each swarm of enemies attacks the base, you reach a checkpoint, which means even if all your Q-Force generators die, you will restart from that checkpoint instead of the beginning of the stage. Which is good, because the stages are kinda long. You might think the next thing we're going to do is head to the keynote so we can progress in the level. This is incorrect, we're going to go explore. If you're playing the game correctly, at least half, if not more, of the gameplay time will be spent exploring to find bolts, collectibles, and weaponry. That didn't happen. There's not a lot of platforming in the game, but it is notable, and if you're playing in multiplayer on your PlayStation 3, I do believe that you no longer have a shadow so you can see where you land, which is unfortunate. In single player, you do have a shadow. And I am playing in single player, not because multiplayer isn't fun, but because I think it's a lot easier to see the game design in single player, because you control the pacing a lot better. These larger weapon machines contain heavy weaponry, like the Warmonger or the Plasma Bomb Launcher. I personally prefer the Plasma Bomb Launcher.
You have unlocked the Plasma Bomb Launcher.
The Warmonger turret is definitely stronger, but the Plasma Bomb Launcher can hit enemies that are behind barriers or shields. These guys are the second weakest enemies in the game. They don't get destroyed as easily as the small fellows. You can take out one of them with melee, but if there's more than one, you're probably best sticking to guns. There are teleporters that take us back to our base, which is what I just did there before the cutscene initiated. As you can see, the enemies are coming from the left lane. We don't need to worry too much because they're not coming in large numbers. That will change later in the game, obviously, and later in this stage as well. The place with the highest concentration of ammo and nanotech is of course your base, so if you're low on ammo, just retreat to the base. This strategy really only applies if you're defending though, because if you're taking out a key node and you retreat all the way back to your base, then the enemies respawn. We bought some chrono mines and a fire turret. The fire turrets aren't very powerful, but they're more than enough for weaker enemies, and if you buy multiple, they can take out stronger enemies.
Follow this power cable.
The chrono mines, when they explode, slow enemies down so you can get a good shot at them. Or so the turrets can get a good shot at them. Either works. The Plasma Bomb Launcher has a pretty high explosive radius, as does the Warmonger. You can see up here that this chrono mine slowed down the enemy just in time for us to arrive and blast him to pieces.
The Q4 space is secure. All generators are online.
You won't be able to defend the base all by yourself. That becomes physically impossible when several enemies are coming down both lanes, which will happen later in this stage. In between waves of enemies, the game gives you a breather to go exploring. Eventually the game will run out of waves though, and you can do all the exploring you want. Things that trigger new waves are often finding a certain collectible or opening a weapon pod.
Ooh, shiny.
The golden bolts don't directly affect gameplay, but they allow you to unlock bonuses and cheats. You can see right away that there's a ton of hidden areas to find, which you wouldn't expect from a game that is mostly known as a tower defense title. All of the areas are connected, which makes it really satisfying to move directly from one into another. You basically never have to stop finding new stuff until you're all done. The main thing we're on the lookout for while exploring are bolts and weapon pods, because those are the two most important things to defend our base. They're actually the only collectibles aside from golden bolts, but
Looks like the old
that's okay.
homestead could use some defensive.
You can see right here that this tube leads to the main area of the stage, which we can look over after I stop screwing around with the physics crates. There's a lot of places to go to from here. The stage isn't very large, but it is the very first one, and the rest are much bigger. You can always look to your map to see where the markers are for the weapon pods and key nodes. So even if you get stuck while exploring, the game has you covered there. All of the enemies that aren't trying to assault your base have an aggro range, as you would expect, otherwise the game would be rather broken. Enemies that are attacking your base are always in aggro and they can't be de-aggroed except by using a Groovatron. But really that just freezes them. Freezes them in dance. The cryo shot is probably my favorite weapon, or second favorite in this game. It's definitely not the strongest, but it kills enemies very quickly. It's also fairly good for sniping at enemies, which I'm going to be using it for a lot later. As I'm sure you've noticed by now, we can smash through crates just by smashing into them with our hover boots, which makes bulk collection that much easier. I think it's worth noting that the levels look as nice as in any other Ratchet and Clank game. And I mean, this is a refinery, and you can tell it's a refinery by looking at the surroundings. The plasma bomb launcher can eliminate a small group of enemies in one shot if you aim it properly. I'm sure I'd do that at least once, though I can't make any promises. There aren't that many enemy types in this game, to say the least, but there are plenty enough to keep it interesting, and more get introduced as the game goes on. Teleporting back to our base was just the quickest way to get over here. Unfortunately, I mistook the right lane for the left lane.
The Q-Force base is under
But I
attack.
fixed that. Our generators quickly take damage from enemies, especially multiple ones. We can repair them, but it costs a lot of bolts.
The Q-Force base is
However, as satisfying as it might be to hoard bolts because you like seeing the number go up, there's nothing to spend them on but defenses, so make sure you do that. Now, I'm not going to lie, this game is fairly easy if you go out of your way to explore and find money. It's super easy to create so many defenses that the enemies never stand a chance. But you don't want to underestimate them either. That said, even if you fuck up a whole lot, you have a whole 6 generators, and you can win the stage as long as you have even one of them. You do get points toward earning a medal if you complete the stage with all 6 generators intact, though. And earning medals gives you character upgrades, not weapon upgrades. The upgrades include higher resistance to damage, faster hover boots, and regenerating health. We're headed toward the first keynote right now, and I chose the worst possible weapon to take out these turret enemies. Literally the worst possible weapon. That doesn't stop me from keeping at it, though. Eventually I wise up and start using different weapons entirely. I like using the cryo shot on most normal enemies so we can level it up and use it for sniping later. And the plasma bomb is useful for standing behind shields and taking pot shots at enemies. There aren't a lot of shields in this game, but it's always useful where there are. It's always important to tackle a keynote when you're nearly certain you won't be interrupted, because if you have to run back to the base, all the enemies in the keynote respawn. At the keynote, rather, not in it. Eventually the shields, like the ones right in front of us, will be destroyed by enemy shots, but hopefully you can kill the enemies before that happens. This stage only has one keynote, but some of them will have multiple. I apologize if I make it sound like the game has a lot of stages. There are only 4 normal ones, and then the 5th one is its own weird thing. The game was criticized for being fairly short. It's about 3 hours and 20 minutes long if you know what you're doing.
The Planetary Defense Center is now accessible.
Now that we've unlocked the keynote, we can head straight to the Planetary Defense Center and start taking back the planet. I do a bit more exploring before I head there, but we're going to cut to when I tackle it. Welcome to the Planetary Defense Center. It is the most heavily defended section of the level, which should come as no surprise. In addition to a ton of enemies, the Planetary Defense Centers also tend to have a lot of platforming obstacles. The ones here are pretty tame. You can even long jump over this entire gap, I think. Yeah, like that. In later stages, the Planetary Defense Centers are much bigger and much more well defended than this. But considering this is just the start of something much bigger, it gives you a decent taste of what's to come. We don't want those guys shooting at us while we platform, so we're going to take out our plasma bomb launcher, which feels like it was actually made for this specific situation. Go figure. You can grab onto ledges if you perform a near miss, but it's not that big a deal if you do fall down, since you respawn nearly exactly where you fell. Dying in this game is really a non-issue. You do have health for a reason. You can die, but you respawn almost instantly. The only real way to lose is if you lose all your generators. The only real thing you forfeit by dying is time, but you don't even lose that much time either. As you can see right here, the cryo shot dispatches enemies fairly quickly, so even though it's not the most powerful weapon, it is useful when you don't want to use the ammo of your more heavy-hitting weapons.
Awesome.
Those are a lot of turret enemies. I would say this is an ideal situation for the plasma bomb launcher if there ever was one. You can see a big ship thing, turret monster floating up over there. It's the strongest enemy in the stage. It takes a lot of hits and it loves grenades, but strafing around it and jumping usually solves the issue, as most issues are solved in Ratchet and Clank games. Although the combustor isn't terribly powerful, it's a much better choice here than the cryo shot, which deals almost no damage to non-organic enemies. And I mean, the Pyroblaster is probably literally the worst choice for this, but it doesn't have that much health left, so why not? We also planted a Doppelbanger there, which actually deals pretty good damage. I haven't seen a lot of people use Doppelbangers in Ratchet and Clank, but I'm going to be making heavy use of them in this particular run-through. Now, after we turn on the Planetary Defense Center, we have to head back to our base to actually activate it. And when we do this, one giant invasion of enemies will head toward us.
Power has been restored to the Planetary Defense Center. Return to base to initiate reboot sequence.
First, we need to make sure all our defenses are on the up and up before we press the go button, and when the invasion actually starts, I will shut up and let the design speak for itself. However, if you don't want to watch the whole invasion, I will, we'll put an annotation there so that way you can skip to the final wave. We don't have that many defensive options yet, but we will unlock more as the game progresses. You can see we have quite a few more turrets, which are the most important defense. We're going to repair one of our generators, which has sustained minimal damage, by a couple more mines, and then we'll start shooting stuff.
Reboot sequence initiated. Warning, major assault in progress. Enemy dropship now on approach.
Time to make history! Let's roll!
Reboot sequence is 25% complete.
I sure could use some firepower about now. Free ammo.
Reboot sequence is 75% complete. Reboot sequence is 90% complete.
I got ammo! More bad guys.
The Q-Force base is under attack.
Evil sleeps for no one.
Reboot sequence complete. The Planetary Defense Center is now fully operational.
Captain Quark, I see you've reassembled your pathetic Q-Force. It's amazing that anyone would ever align themselves with you after all your treachery.
Now wait a minute. Quark may be a little rough around the edges, but at least he's not hiding behind a mask. Well, I guess he is hiding behind a mask, but he's not afraid of the universe knowing who he is.
Oh, LOL. I'm not afraid.
Hold on, I know this guy.
Stuart Sergo? He used to be captain of the Captain Quark Cadet Club. You wrote some really disturbing fan fiction.
I was in a different place back then. All I wanted to do was be just like you. Then I watched as you were involved in scandal after scandal. And every time the galaxy just forgave you! You're nothing but one big epic fail! And this time, you're going to pay. Colon, close parentheses. I'm out.
The planet is now secure.